Okay, welcome to the 2024 edition, our fifth year at the Wpial Blitz Show. My name is Bruce Badgley. As always, my buddy Ian McMeans. And Ian, why don't you introduce our very special guest we've got with us tonight?
Yeah, we're very happy to have Coach Laroi Johnson from Imani Christian High School joining us today. We've been big fans of everything you've done in the past, from all the work you did at Stowe Rocks, and now moving, actually, I guess, back to Imani Christian because you were there as the coordinator. Back when they had their big runs, and it's been really cool to kind of watch your journey as a coach. Imani started a football program when they didn't even have one, in the early 2010s, and built themselves up to making the playoffs and made a run to the championship game. And you produced some awesome offenses at Stowe Rocks, and now coming back to Imani Christian. And the school made a decision to play up in 3A this year at a much higher classification. And for a school that's one of the smallest enrollment wise in the Wpial, can you kind of just give us some insight on what all went into that decision to play up in 3A? Because I think, looking at your roster, you're loaded with talent, and we're really excited to see what you can do. But, a little behind the scenes, we're just, like to know a little what went into that.
Um, First, I want to say thank you for all the kind things you said. I truly do appreciate it. I really do. And I've always been a fan of yours as well. So thank you very much. Um, just, we have some pretty good talented players, and we just, if you know me, I'm never afraid of a challenge. So, and being challenged to do so is never a problem for me. So, if you just know that the kind of person I am, I'm a competitive SOB. I'm just going to be a guy who's never going to, walk away from competition. So, to step up and play up in classification, we not, I know the guys we got. We're not running from that. That's a part of just being competitive. That's just my nature. So just when it came up and the thought about it came up, I was the first one to green light it, because I want to give my guys if I can put them on the biggest stages in the world, I would. I just want to play it in the biggest stages and have the kids had opportunities to be able to shine their talent.
That's
Well,
awesome.
I
One
tell
of
you
the
what,
other things.
Coach,
Oh,
it's
go
just
ahead,
very
Bruce.
interesting, how teams, make that decision. But, obviously, you talked about the fact that you've got a wealth of talent on your team, and that in large part had a lot to do with why you decided to play up. Talk a little bit about, some of the guys that you're going to lean on this year, that are going to make this jump up to 3A, important.
I think we have a good team. The thing about taking over this program is that we've never been like an old team, so we've always had young guys, freshmen, out there starting and playing. So you're looking at some guys like Matt Fulmore, who's a 3-year starter for us. Guys like that. David Davis this will be his 3rd year starting. You're looking at guys who may be young in as far as underclassmen is concerned, but they're really older players because they've started a number of games now. So the comfort of being out there is going to be a little easier. Marcus Williams. When we got Marcus never even played football before. So when we got Marcus, his football's all been learned with us, and now he's made a tremendous jump. And that's another guy who will be leaning on. But we got quite a few guys. Darius Clark will be another guy who I think is going to make a tremendous jump. Jaden Williams, another young receiver, DB who's played a lot for us. Who's been playing since he was a freshman. So the best thing about our program is that it's truly given a lot of guys an opportunity to play. And I think what you'll see with us this year is you'll see the kind of the maturation of that of when now the guys have kind of turned over a little bit. We're losing some guys, but the guys there have all played a little bit. Everybody has played pretty much has started over 9 games now. So, we've got a lot of we've replaced some guys, but at the same time, we really got a lot of veteran players on there, even though there's some underclassmen.
You mentioned about, some kids who came and had never played football before. Is there kind of a unique challenge with coaching at a private school where you get kids together who maybe some have never played before, but they've never played together before, versus a public school where the kids have played together all through youth football and kind of know each other and know their talents? Do you think one's harder than the other with, trying to bring together a group of kids that have never been as a team together before and put them all out there, at a private school like that?
I think you bring up outstanding points. There is a huge people just don't understand the difference between coaching a private school and coaching a public school. They are two different beasts. Like they're two different monsters, and you got to understand. Almost in a sense, you have to be kind of understanding how to flex your coaching philosophies, because one is working with kids who've known each other for years, and the other one is, man, these guys might have never met each other. So you're trying to blend in some of the things. And, I play professional. So, you have an understanding of what it takes to blend in personalities, to blend in people, and in a sense, trying to take a professional mindset to it, and understanding that, I hope kids, hope to go off and play in college. And if you go off and play in college, you're going to play with guys that you never met before. But you're going to be expected to do your job, in all the ways that you're supposed to do it. So we try to teach that philosophy here, as we try to, teach a lot of college principles and a lot of college thinking while you're here at Imani.
Yeah, and the life lesson of what you're doing is just got to be, tremendous. That, trying to, achieve goals, to, be your best. That's really the message that I see that, your school is sending to these guys, that, to do your best, to achieve what you can. And that's how you're going to basically win at life, correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's you hit the nail on the head. We want to give our kids the best opportunity in the best light that we can. Win, lose, or draw, that doesn't matter. That's not what the most important thing. I just told my kids today that, as much as we love to win, winning, it's really about how you handle the losing and how you bounce back from the losing. The winning is great. I get it. I've won a lot. It feels wonderful, but you learn the most when you you take the losses, and it's what you do after the loss. It's how you come back from that. It's your willingness to participate when you lost the game or when you lost the rep. And I'm trying to teach that to my young men now, who are talented, who are now facing some challenges of, there's some really good other talented guys. So, you may lose a battle or two. That's just part of the game. So trying to teach them just small battles of understanding how to, winning is in losing and losing is in winning. It's all, wrapped in the kind of same thing.
One other really cool thing that I saw you guys did this week was you did little interviews with all your players, and I've seen them post them all on Twitter. That was really cool. I thought, to kind of get to know the players beyond just, a name and a box score, but kind of who they are, what their interests are, and also just to get them practice in front of a camera, because who knows after a game who's going to stick a camera in their face, and get them used to that. So I thought that was awesome. I'd never seen someone do that before. That was really cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, we just, we always trying to push new ways to get guys, and you hit it right on the head. I want guys to be able to speak more fluently through the camera. I want them to be able to represent their families, themselves, the school, just everybody in the best light that they possibly can. And the only way you do that is by giving them constant repetition, the same way we do in football. It's the same way we try to preach in media, and understanding how to talk to people and talk and using the camera for a good thing. A lot of our young kids, they're using the camera for the wrong things instead of turning that camera around. And how about we learn how to do some interview skills, and you can practice right there. It's right there in front of you. You can post it. You can do so much with that camera if we just do it and we use it in the right way. So I'm trying to teach it to them to use it in the best light. But those guys, they did a good job, and they like doing it. So The question will be really is watching how many people try to do it after us. That'll be the real thing. How many people do it after us. And then I just want them to shout us out. It's okay to do it after us. Just be like, hey, man, I like what you did. I'm doing it too. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is such a sensitive topic. Kids and cameras and social media and whatever like that. I mean, we could make a whole show, out of that. But I'll tell you what, Laroi, everybody's paying attention to you guys now. And 3A is, kind of uncharted territory, but going to be very interested to see how you guys perform. Obviously, you got a very talented squad, and we're really looking forward to what you guys can do. And we want to, thank you a lot for joining us here tonight. And we're going to have to get you on again, in the postseason. How about that?
Yeah, that would be nice. That our job is to try to make it there. I definitely appreciate it, and we're climbing that mountain one day at a time, and we look forward to just being able to play football this season and go out there and kind of finish what we started last year. We feel like that the guys know that we are a very good team, and we dropped the ball a little bit in that last game, and it's a very very it just sits very bad taste in our mouth a little bit. So we're hungry to kind of prove those things wrong and prove the things that we know about each other right.
Well, listen, thank you very much for joining us, Coach. We really appreciate it, and best of luck this year.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks. And
Thanks,
then
Coach.
just
Good
go
luck
ahead and
this year.
exit there, Coach.
Yep. Go Saints.
See you later.
Thank you.
Wow. I mean,
That
how
was
great is
And
that? I
yeah,
mean,
and the decision, they decided to play up not only in football but also in basketball. They're playing up in 6A, so they've got a lot of talent at that little school. But I think we've got another interview here coming
yes,
right
we
on.
do.
Yes.
We're gonna try and get our buddy Ron Prady from
Greater Latrobe.
Latrobe.
Yes.
And
Coach
there
Prady,
he is. Wow.
thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Coach, we just got done talking with Laroi Johnson, the head coach at Imani Christian. They voluntarily decided to move up to 3A this year. Your team got forced up enrollment-wise from 4A to 5A. Arguably, potentially one of the best teams Latrobe has had in a long, long time. With the talent you have returning, and you took state champs Wpial all the way to the wire last year in the playoffs. So can you talk about the excitement in the community around the program coming into this season?
Yeah, I think the things that we've accomplished in the last 2 years, prior to 2022, I don't think. Well, I know they hadn't won. Hadn't had a winning record since 2001.
Wow.
At Latrobe. So to knock that out the first year and win the first playoff game since 1968 at Latrobe, our first year there was a huge accomplishment. We beat a very good Highlands team that was 9-1 coming into the playoffs, and was a fantastic team. So that kind of started us in the right direction. Then last year, going to West Allegheny, first round of the playoffs, and playing really well against another really, really great team. And then to play Wpial like we did. We didn't have the start we wanted, but they had a lot to do with that. They're certainly as talented as anybody. But the big thing was we were down 25-7 at half. And, I've said it numerous times. I think most teams probably would have packed it in then, and you could see the score ended up 49-7 or 49-14. To our guys' credit, that didn't happen. We battled back. We got in the game and kind of took them to the end there. But credit to those guys. They made plays at the end when they needed to. But from that, going into the offseason, the community is excited. Our district's excited. Our players are excited. And it's great to see around Latrobe, having the Steelers work out in town, all year, or not all year, but, in the summer. it's a football town, and they want a winner, and it's been a long time, and hopefully we can continue.
And why do you think that it was that there was such a, such a dry spell? Certainly, it may not have, I mean, it's a cultural thing, obviously winning, and it's not just, the team that's out on the field. It's everything that supports, the team is just as important as the X's and O's and the guys out there. So, can you put your finger on, what was the item that really got the switch turned on to turn this program around? Can you point to just one thing?
Well, I don't know if there's just one thing. I can point to a few things. I know I've taught here for almost 20 years, but previously I was at Penn Trafford for 10 years, and we had success there, a lot of it. And I just didn't see the belief in the players there that they could win week in and week out. And I thought, there were certainly times that, they went to go play certain teams, and I don't think they felt like, that they could win. And I think we've changed that attitude in our players. And then the fact that, we do have some really good players right now, that certainly helps. And lastly, I think, to have the support of the community and the administration that we have, is fantastic. And I was fortunate. If I've done anything right, I think in these 3 years, I put together a really good staff that cares about our players and not just winning and losing, but, developing, great people and ultimately winning football games, but winning in life too.
Yeah. So you mentioned coaching at Penn Trafford previously, so you're a little familiar with the the level of competition at 5A, although the conference you guys played in last year, having to play the likes of Thomas Jefferson and McKeesport and even Trinity, who was a really good team last year. Your conference this year, arguably, I think, is top to bottom the strongest in the Wpial. All 7 teams in the conference had a 500 or better record last year. So, how do you feel? Do you feel your team's prepared to take on that absolute slog? It's like the SEC of the Wpial, basically. I mean, there's no off weeks in this conference. When I was looking at the schedule, I was like, holy cow, how did all these teams wind up together?
Yeah. Well, I think you said it. There's no off weeks, and the big thing, I think the jump for us is developing some depth and being able to handle the physical rigors of week in and week out. Armstrong and Kiski are good teams, well-coached teams that I've competed against in the past. Woodland Hills and Gateway and Penn Trafford and Franklin are all great programs that have been successful for a long time. So they're going to be physical battles, and that's a big concern for us. Is in the jump up is to be able to sustain and withstand those physical battles week in and week out, and taking care of our players so that they're body-wise they're prepared to play week in and week out. We've gotten stronger. That was a big emphasis, obviously, to handle the physicality was to get bigger and stronger throughout the offseason. We've done a good job of that. Now we've just got to go out and hopefully, I'm sure everybody mentions, you got to stay healthy, as healthy as you can be, develop some depth in case, you do run into some issues health-wise, but also to be able to rest some guys, especially on that defensive line, linebacker spot. And I think we've gotten to that spot where we feel pretty good that we're starting to develop some depth.
Yeah. And, Coach, I talked to almost 100 coaches here, preseason here through media days. I'm, out in District 3 in Reading and what have you. And, you touched on the fact that it is such a skill. Not the average fan understands that developing depth is part of the game plan for a coaching staff when you go to each and every game. You've got to try and, keep the cupboard full, so to speak, or keep that pipeline moving forward. And, obviously you said you were working on that, in the off season, and especially moving up in classification. Maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you and your coaching staff do to, develop that depth in each particular week's game.
So fortunately for us, it goes back to even last year and the year before. I think it's big when you do get into those games where you can play guys in the second half and kind of get them under the lights on a Friday night and get to feel that energy and the speed of the game. That helps. And then going into the off season, let me go back. Those guys that play sometimes when you get into hopefully some lopsided games and you play those guys, that's a huge thing for them. And that's important because those are guys that you hope a year from now or 2 years from now that are going to help you on Friday night. So that's one thing. And then we mentioned, the weight room work and the speed and agility work that we do in the off season is another thing. And then it comes down to practice, getting those guys reps. You'd love to, just bang your ones all day and let them take every rep. But for us, it's important to get our twos and our threes and those guys that are on the fringe of playing that are a snap away from being a starter. Getting those guys reps and quality reps is important to us, and we make sure we do that every single day.
Good stuff.
Great. So one of the other things that we like to try and do on this show when we have the opportunity is, to give some shout outs to the offensive and defensive linemen, because, the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, they get all the press, all the headlines. It's easy to find stats on them. And you've got some incredible talent there, with John Wetzel coming back and Alex Tash, one of the top rated recruits in Western Pennsylvania in the Wpial. So, but if you want to take a minute, give some shout outs to your linemen, because we like to try and publicize those guys, because that's where everything really happens, is in the trenches.
No doubt. Yeah, 100%. So we got a couple guys that'll be 3-year starters for us. Cody Crawl plays our left guard. He's also plays D end for us, and he's a huge part of what we do. Caleb Lehman will be a 3-year starter at left tackle. Also, we'll see time on the defensive line at nose and the defensive end. Just another really good program kid that does everything right. And, we rely on him a ton. We have a bunch of guys kind of in the mix. Anthony Scarton and Marco Scarton are twins. They'll both play up front for us. And all these guys we feel like can help us on both sides. So we do feel like we have that rotation on the defensive line that we can play 6 or 7 guys, which is important. A kid by the name of Wade Enoch is in the mix for us now. Lucas Collins, is another guy that'll play up front for us that has really developed over the last couple of years. Alessandro Castillo is another kid, and Brady Cronenwetter. So we feel like we've got 7 or 8, maybe 9 guys that we feel pretty good about, and we're going to probably need all those guys as the season progresses. But they've done a great job, and those guys don't get enough credit. But you mentioned it, Ian, that those guys make you go.
Yeah, they really do. The unsung heroes there. We always try and get some attention to the big uglies there up front.
Yeah, they're certainly ugly, that's for sure.
Well, listen, Coach, I tell you what, thanks for joining us here tonight. Obviously, first week of full camp here. The time of year that the most wonderful time of the year for us high school football fans is first padded practice and everything else. So I'll tell you what. Obviously, Ian talked about the fact that you're in a very difficult decision. We're going to keep an eye on that all season. And, we wish you all the luck in the world, sir.
Well, I appreciate that, guys. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks a lot,
Coach.
Ron. Just go ahead and exit out there. And let's hopefully, we'll get you back around playoff time.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
luck this year.
Take
care.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
and Latrobe's such a great story that we've been kind of following for a few years. That you'll remember 2 years ago, as Coach Prady mentioned, that they won their first playoff game since 1968 when they beat Highlands. I think that game went to overtime, if I recall correctly. I think they beat them in overtime. So, I mean, to end your playoff drought with an overtime victory is just awesome. And they won another playoff game last year, and now they're moving up to, like I said, arguably the top to bottom best conference in the Wpial, at least on paper, from what I can tell. And they've got an absolute slog of a schedule that the Wpial didn't do them any favors either. That I think their non-conference games include like Plum, who also moved, or who's also a 5A team, Pine Richland, who's one of the top 5A teams, and then Norwin, who just moved up from 5A to 6A. So
yeah, who did they make angry at the Wpial office?
I was looking at their schedule and I was like, holy smokes, like, and obviously the non-conference games don't count towards making the playoffs, as we know. Although the Wpial did make some changes there this year. So they had a slight change that I will talk about in just a minute here on how they aligned, or how they made a decision on what teams are going to make the playoffs. It's not a true power rankings formula yet, I'm sorry to say, Bruce. But they did make a change. So I actually threw together a couple quick slides.
Just a couple of quick slides.
I'll pull them up here. I know we've got another guest hopping on in a minute here. John, our friend John from PA Today Sports, he was on with us last year, does a great job. But just real quick, when we talk about alignment, as far as history goes, dating back to 1914 when the Wpial started, there was just one classification. They added a few more into the 1930s. It was AA, A, and B up through 1973, which was when the Wpial and Pittsburgh Catholic League merged together. And then they basically kept the same three classifications, but changed it to A, or single A, double A, triple A. Then in 1980, we had the 4 classification alignment till 2016 when we went to 6 classes. So that's what we have now. Typically, I will refer to the 4 classification era as like AA, AAA, Quad A, and then the 6 classification era as a number and letter. So just for reference moving forward, for those that haven't tuned into the show before, I will probably refer to both as a kind of amateur historian. But the change that was made this year in the playoffs, you'll notice that rather than having the only way to qualify for the playoffs is based on how your teams finish in your conference. Generally speaking, the top 2 or 3 teams from every conference are going to make the playoffs. But then instead of having these wild cards be, just decided from the 4th place teams, the wild cards will actually be picked by the Wpial selection committee. So the situation that happened in 5A last year, where Upper St. Clair went 8-2 overall, but missed the playoffs because of they finished, 4th in their conference because of the 3-way tie. The Wpial this year, even as a 4th place finisher or 5th place finisher, could select them as one of the wild card teams. So they've changed that a little bit, that now, other than 6A, the other 5 classifications all have wild card spots that will be picked by the selection committee. So not a power rankings formula like Bruce and the folks out in the East like, but I think it does give the committee a little more flexibility to try and actually get the best teams into the playoffs.
This is what I've been preaching that the PIAA needs to do to in 5A and 6A, and insofar as when you obviously you have 7 6A teams in the Wpial and 6A, but you've got 32 in District 1, and yet you're only taking one team out of both. Where I felt that in 6A and 5A that some of the teams, and even 4A in certain situations, that there should be some at-large teams out of districts that should be brought into the PIAA tournament. And this is maybe a precursor of that. Maybe, this kind of format that they'll take a look at, and maybe, bring that into the PIAA tournament as well. I'd love to see some at-large bids in the PIAA football, just like they do every other sport in that for a PIAA tournament. Every other sport has, a 1, 2, and a 3 seed out of a district. Really need to think that out in football as well. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, and especially where in like the 5A state bracket the last couple years, you had Cathedral Prep out of District 10 getting 2 bye weeks in the state bracket. Like, why have bye weeks in the state bracket when you have other teams that could be added in some?
Absolutely right. I mean, no bye weeks. I'm sure teams from District 1 don't mind, getting on a bus and going to Erie. I mean, it happens all the
That would be a heck of a
time.
trip.
So anyway, I think we've got our next guest here. If you want me to bring him on in.
Yeah, we can bring John in. I'll just, while he's joining, wrap up my thoughts here on the playoffs. So the one other change to the playoff qualifications this year is that in 5A, the last 2 years, only 8 teams made the playoffs, but the PIAA moved the Wpial 5A champion back to joining the state bracket in the semifinals. So now we've got an extra week of Wpial playoffs. So in 5A, 12 teams are able to qualify for the playoffs, but the inverse problem is now happening in 4A, where the Wpial 4A champ got bumped back to entering the state bracket in the quarterfinals. So there's only 3 weeks of available schedule time in 4A. So only 8 teams in 4A are going to make the playoffs, which is going to be, I think, a huge storyline as we go through the season. Other than that, it's all pretty standard. And John, thanks for joining us. I was just kind of running through one of the big changes on the playoff qualification this year is that the Wpial added wildcard slots in every classification that'll be decided by the committee rather than having formulas and standings determine everything, which I think gives us a little more flexibility. Well, not us, gives the Wpial a little more flexibility in how they pick playoff teams. So thanks again for joining us, John. You were on last year, did some great work, during the season, in the off season. I mean, you've just been out there grinding. So you want to give a little plug to, what you do on your site and your Twitter and everything else, and then we can get rolling with our classification by classification previews.
Sure, I'll be quick. I basically travel the Wpial and talk to the athletes, talk to the coaches, try to get inside and try to give the people what they want to see. So that's basically what I've been doing this summer, and just excited, man. Football season's finally here.
It is.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It doesn't really start, I don't think, until the first padded practice. But that's just me.
Man, bodies were flying around today.
Yeah, you were out to what, 2 or 3 different ones just today?
No, I was at the one today.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at a lot last week. I went to a lot, but I'll be out Seton LaSalle. I think I'm stopping out Beaver. There's a few I'll be stopping out this week. There's a it's like a 3 or 4 team scrimmage this Saturday. Imani, Bishop, Farrell, and Laroi was saying, or Rich was saying, there might be one more team. I think I'm going to go to that.
Nice.
I went last year, really good scrimmage.
Those are all some good championship level squads. Yeah,
for sure.
Good.
Nice.
All right. Well, you got control, Ian, right? Hopefully.
Sure. Yeah, I threw together some quick slides here. So we'll start in 6A, kind of work our way through everything. If folks in the chat have questions for us, feel free to throw them out there. So I'll give a high level summary, then I'll turn it over to John, because like he said, he's been out there talking to the players and the coaches. So he knows a lot of the nitty gritty details more than I do. In 6A, the big story, I think, is the 2 teams moving up, Norwin and Hempfield, to give 6A actually more of a season now. The last cycle, there was only 5 teams, so less than half of the schedule was conference play. That, in the past cycle, only 4 out of your 10 games in 6A were, conference opponents. But now with 7 teams, you got 6 conference games throughout the schedule. So a lot more of these big schools clashing against each other. North Allegheny, the 2-time defending Wpial champs, the runners up in the state last year. But Central Catholic won the conference during the regular season. I think those 2 are the presumptive favorites, and the other teams are going to battle it out for a playoffs for the last 2 playoff spots. But I'll turn it over to John, let him talk about what he's been seeing out there with these players and coaches and schools.
I mean, I guess I'll start with Central Catholic. I'm going to touch a bit on them. We know about the Bradley Gompers. We even know about Xavier Thomas. But you got to look at the guys that they have down, like Zachary Gleason Jr. He just came over from Chartiers Valley. He's a technician at the defensive back position, one of the best in the class of 2026. Roman Thompson, he's another guy. He's a guy that almost looks college ready now. He has a really good physique, and he just, he's bulked up a lot. And he's another guy I expect to make a bigger impact. But you have a guy like Coulson Gatton, who I feel in that 2026 class, his body and the way he plays, he's the most college ready right now. Everything he's doing is preparing him for the next level. And I could see him playing in the Big Ten, or, I guess we'll call it the old fashioned Big Ten now. But I can see him playing that type of football. He's a guy that's just really put together. They have a good quarterback in Walls. I mean, I was out there last year when Peyton Wayner was a starter, and Walls looked sharp. If Peyton wasn't there, he could have been the starter there last year. I think he's going to step in under Laymeyer, who's a great coach. He's almost like a quarterback whisperer. Every quarterback that comes up under him, they just produce. I think he's going to have a heck of a year. You move on to the defending WPIL champs in North Allegheny. They went to the state game. They played St. Joe's. I mean, Art Walker, what he does year in and year out is incredible. It's a machine over there. They're going to have guys step up like Jackson Fela at quarterback. He's going to step in this year for Logan Kushner, who was, it's big shoes to step into because he had a heck of a year. But he's going to step in. They have Lincoln Hoke, who on both sides of the ball, he's a monster. And how can we can't forget about Jack Yachenko. I think he's the strongest player in the entire WPIL. He just moves bodies. They also have a guy named Corey Pitts Jr., who picked up an Arizona State offer early in the summer. A lot of people might not know about, but he's a guy that's really smooth out there at defensive back, and he's just really smooth. And I think he's going to be a guy that eventually, I don't want to say it because Kyron Boyd was electric, but I think he might be able to be their Kyron Boyd and give them a spark a little bit more. Then you have the teams like Cannon Mac and Seneca Valley. I call them the sleeper teams because they're very well coached. They just don't quite have as much talent, but they have talent all over the place. And it's kind of contradicting myself by saying that. But what I mean by that is Central Catholic and North Allegheny, they just have a little bit more talent. But with Cannon Mac and Seneca Valley, they can surprise some people. There's a guy over at Seneca Valley, Adam Genn. He's playing, and I heard he had 2 tore up knees, and he was going to be out for the season. But I heard he's toughing through it. He's going to tough it out, and he's going to play. He's a heck of an athlete over there. He's a big tight end, big defensive end. He's just a really, really good athlete. They have another kid named Jaden Price. He's another defensive back that I think is underrated in the Wpial. Ton of Division I offers. I believe he's committed to Toledo off the top of my head. But he's another guy. I mean, there's in 6A this year, then you talk about Norwin. You got Tristan Tavares, who's been up there in the passing leaders for he started as a freshman. And then last year he lit it up. He's really coming together. He's not the biggest. I talked to him in the summer. He said, I'm not the biggest, but I know I'm the best. And he got that attitude, and that's what you need out of a quarterback. So that's that's the highlight of 6A.
But really, do you foresee, and this is just me now, I don't foresee any of those 5 teams. I don't see really, Cannon, McMillan, Hempfield, Mount Lebanon, Seneca, or Norwin. Either one of those teams with a victory over PCC or North Allegheny this year. Ian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely tiers here in 6A that,
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah, that Central Catholic and North Allegheny are the top tier, and then between Seneca Valley, Norwin, Cannon Mac is probably the next tier. Mount Lebanon's a really hard team for me to read just because they graduated so many kids.
Look, 4 teams get in. You just want to try and get in, right? You just said, 4 teams are going to get in. So who are the 4? Who do you think, guys, are the 4 teams that ultimately will get in from 6A?
That's tough. That is tough because we know, 2 out of the 5.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think Seneca Valley is going to be better than they were last year. I think they got some guys that got some experience now, and I think they're going to take a little bit of a step forward. Cannon Mac's going to be under a new quarterback after Mike Evans. He was there for a long time under his dad, and it's gonna take some time. They got some pieces back, but they lost a lot in Caden Singleton, Zach Welsh, Mike Evans, like I spoke about. It's gonna be a bit of a rebuilding year for them. I think Norwin with Tristan Tavares, what I've seen from him, I think they might surprise some people. But with Mount Lebanon, they might also surprise some people because I know new head coach, tough guy. I know he's instilled. I talked to some people over there. He's instilling toughness, and they're liking what he's doing over there. So I think that 4th seed's really up for grab.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to the Mount Lebanon Norwin game. If I had to pick, I agree with you. I think Central and North Allegheny are the top 2. I think Seneca Valley's slightly ahead of the rest of the pack, but I mean, you could easily wind up in a situation where Lebo, Cannon, Mac, Norwin, and Seneca all kind of beat each other, and then you got to figure out tiebreakers between them. That I don't know if there's a clear third best team here. Hempfield's kind of in a rebuilding year. They lost a lot to graduation, so I think they're pretty clearly the bottom team. But those other 4 for the last 2 spots, if I had to pick, I would probably go Seneca Valley and Mount Lebanon, but I think Norwin's right there too.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I don't disagree with you. Tavares is great, and the experience and all that, and and Seneca wasn't that far behind Mount Lebanon last year. I think it was a 17-14 game they played that, they were pretty close to that last playoff spot. So on to 5A, we actually just interviewed Coach Prady from Greater Latrobe, and 5A is just absolutely loaded this year. Peters Township is the defending Wpial champs, runners up in the state, won their first Wpial title last season, and 5A is always fascinating too because looks like we got the wrong helmet there for Moon. That's the McKeesport helmet. I'll have to talk to our buddy Chris about that. Chris, I know you're watching. Chris does great work for us on the graphics. I just saw that there. So Chris is awesome. At any rate, but the Allegheny 6 conference has had a team in the championship game in 6 straight years, which is kind of an incredible run between Peters making it 3 times, St. Clair, Moon made it once. And even going back to West Allegheny making it, back in, I think, Bob Palco's last year. But the Northeast Conference with Penn Hills and Pine Richland, if I had to bet on someone to win 5A right now, I would probably pick Pine Richland. The Big East has 7 teams that all of them were 500 or better last year. Now, Latrobe, Armstrong, and Kiski are moving up from 4A. But nevertheless, this is a loaded group, and Plum's got a good squad. So there's a lot of talent all around here. I'll turn it over to John, let him talk about some specifics. But 5A is wide open, and with 12 teams making the playoffs, there's going to be good playoff games.
And that's what I want to talk about. Before John goes down, his thing there, the specifics. 12 out of 19 teams make it in. That's what I was counting in my mind here. Seems to be, that's a pretty high percentage of, teams getting in. 12 out of 19. Anyway, that's just, my thought there. Before we go down.
Also, it won't happen, but I think you could make a case. They just kind
of went the opposite end of last year. Last year they didn't have enough. I think
that's
this year they did too many.
It got really ugly at the end of I think a 2-loss Upper St. Clair got left out last year.
Yep.
Right.
Yep, you're right.
But they had and so now it's gonna be they're going, the opposite way. And that's due to scheduling, right, Ian? That's all due to scheduling that they can put that more teams in, right?
Yeah, it's that the Wpial champ in 5A will enter the state bracket in the semifinals. So they have 4 weeks to play with. So the 5A championship game will be back at Heinz Field, Acrisure Stadium, whatever you want to call it. Acrisure Stadium, I guess, because Heinz Field's in Aliquippa now. But at Acrisure Stadium. So because they wanted to queue the championship games up on, Wpial Championship Sunday, with that extra week, they were able to add more teams into the playoff bracket. So, and honestly, with how many good teams and how much talent there is in 5A, I don't have a problem with it because you could make a good argument for any of the 7 teams in the Big East to make the playoffs. Even a team like Armstrong and Kiski, they both bring back quarterbacks who are multi-year starters. I mean, they're moving up from 4A. Armstrong missed the playoffs in 4A last year. Kiski barely made it in, but they've got some talented kids on those rosters. And Bethel Park's loaded. Moon's got talent. Peters is still loaded. Upper St. Clair's got a lot of talent coming back. South Fayette's got a new head coach. Sorry, John, I'm stealing your thunder. But it's Plum's good. There's a ton of good teams here. So taking 12 teams here, there's going to be a team or two that misses the playoffs in 5A that we're like, they were a pretty good team.
But I would expect that they're going to have. I mean, there's going to be a few teams pretty close to 500. That will make the playoffs with 12 out of 19 going in.
That will happen.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying
some of these 500 teams, their conference is so loaded, they're going to beat a 2-3 win or 2-3 loss team in another section sometimes. I've seen that a lot of times. That's more in single A than anything. But in 5A, I mean, that Big East, like he said, a 500 team coming out of that conference, that's a scary team to see in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too. How are you going to create wild cards when you have, more conference games in the Big East than in the Northeast of the Allegheny Six?
I questioned as well.
Yeah. And that's why, I think they're letting the committee decide. And they said that the committee's going to look at performance over all 9 regular season games. So week 0 doesn't count, but the committee's going to look at how they perform across the 9 regular season games to, not necessarily take the teams with the best records, but I think they're going to give a little more weight in their wild card consideration to, what you do outside of conference play. Whereas in the past, that basically got no consideration. So the committee's going to pick them, like it or not. I mean, back the 2020 year, the first year we did the show during COVID, that year only the conference champs were guaranteed playoff spots, and the committee picked everyone else that made it. So they've done this in the past, and we'll see. When a committee of humans pick something, people will always hate it, but we'll see how it goes. I think it's a little better though than trying to have some mathematical formula to figure it out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, the human element always is, I think, an important aspect in picking playoffs. I mean, they even have it in the college football playoff. I mean, they got rid of the BCS for a reason.
That's true. So, yeah. So, John, who you got your eyes on here in 5A?
Hey, a clear-cut favorite right now. You got to say Peters Township. That's, in my opinion, Nolan DeLucia. He showed that he's one. I think. 1, 2, or 3 in that 2026 class when it comes to quarterbacks. He's talented. And then you got Mickey Vaccarello, one of the best linebackers in the state, not even just Western Pennsylvania. And that guy, a little bit underrated, is Darius McMillan. Darius McMillan on the back end safety. When it came to the big games last year in the playoff time, he made big plays. I mean, he started stepping up, and I think he's going to have a very impactful, senior season. I mean, like you said, where do we even start with this? I could go on all day, so I'm not.
Well, we'll make sure that we have you on more often, John. That's for sure.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. But like Woodland Hills, I mean, you got a quarterback in Cam Walter that's been seeing, a lot of time on the field. He was a full-time starter his sophomore year and basically the starter his freshman year. He's coming into his junior year, coming into his own. He lit it up last year. He's going to be a commander on the field. He's going to get that offense going. Scoop Smith, one of the most dynamic players in the entire state. Forget about Wpial. And then you got George Hill in the middle of the field that is just a quarterback on the defensive side of the ball. It's not just his physical attributes, it's his leadership that is what makes him a special player on the defensive side of the ball. But a guy like Ziggy Moore, Zakir Moore, he's a special talent. I mean, he came into his own last year. And he's a tough tackle every time he touches the ball. Team I want to speak a little bit about is Moon. Moon surprised a lot of people last year under Coach Ryan Lynn. I mean, I think it was 1 win they won the year before, and they came back. They went to the playoffs last year. And that was guys like Nazir Brookins at running back stepping up. I mean, he's like a mini he's like a Marshawn Lynch, man. He's just bulldozing guys. He don't really cut. He just runs straight. He's an old school north and south runner, that's what they do to teams. When they played Gateway in that first round last year, everyone thought Gateway was going to tear them out, blow them out. Moon pounded the ball down.
Right.
They showed them what really wins football games, which is controlling the line of scrimmage. All this 7v7 stuff's great, but in November, none of that matters really. It's about controlling the line of scrimmage, and we could go on all day. I mean, Pine Rich, coach out there.
Well,
We
who are your section favorites there, John?
I didn't
And
have that.
you only get to pick one.
I got Pine Richland. That's tough. I'm gonna say Woodland Hills. I think Woodland Hills is gonna take a step forward this year, and then Peters Township. Those are the three. Who you got, Bruce?
Yeah, I was impressed with Woodland Hills as well. I quite honestly would have the same. Absolutely. Pine Richland, Woodland Hills, and Peters Township. Ian?
Yeah, those were my three also. But let's not sleep on Penn Trafford either. They've got a senior quarterback coming back in Johnny Lowe and Tayso Whipple, their running back, ran for almost 1,400 yards last year. So yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
That's okay.
you're fine. And I mean,
that's all right.
It's all good. And Latrobe's got a lot of talent there. Franklin Regional brings back their, Chase Lemke, their quarterback. I'm just running through.
Okay, I know you guys just had coach on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Alex Tash, I think that's how you say his last name, and John. But those two, I don't care what classification, they're going to have a chance. That's how I look at it. I mean, there's a lot of things that got to happen in 5A now. The line of scrimmage is going to be a bit different, but those two are special, man. And, I think he's the real deal. I've built a lot of film on him. I really do. Latrobe, I'm interested to see what they do moving up from 4A to 5A. I think that's going to give us a little bit better of a look at what the difference is between 4A and 5A, because they're a very good 4A football team. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree.
I think it's a lot mentally much more difficult for a team to go up rather than down. It's a mental thing, not a physical thing.
100%.
And don't sleep on Bethel Park either. I think they could surprise some people. They've got some talent coming back too. So this is an absolutely loaded classification. It's going to be fun to watch all year. I'm sure our games of the week are almost all going to be 5A games this year, just because of how much good stuff's happening.
Let's the smaller schools some love this year.
We always do too. That's
we always do.
I usually do a game of the week for each classification, but on to 4A, where Aliquippa gets to remain in 4A. So my running kind of joke in the offseason was that Aliquippa won the state title on the field and then beat the PIAA twice in court to stay in 4A. Which might have been the harder battle than winning the state title. But the Quips lost a lot to graduation, but I think they're still the team to beat in the Parkway and in 4A in general. McKeesport's got some talent. The really interesting thing here too, though, is remember, because the PIAA moved where the Wpial champ enters the bracket, that only 8 teams are going to make the playoffs in 4A. So only the top 2 in each conference are guaranteed a playoff spot.
There's no way.
Well, what I just said, guaranteed a playoff spot. I mean, obviously, I the wild card thing there, I think, is great. And as you said, there's going to be no agreement with who they pick for the wild card teams.
When I think, to me, the hard thing is, you've got Aliquippa's good, Montour's good, West Allegheny's good. Mars and McKeesport playing in the same conference. They played each other in a semifinal last year. And then you've got Bell Vernon moving back up with TJ, and Trinity's got a lot coming back. Like there's, I guess I just named 8 teams, but it's gonna be a battle just because 1 or 2 losses could sink you this year.
Well, I think everything old is new again. I mean, with Bell Vernon and TJ going at one another, I think is going to be a really good story there in Section 3. As you pointed out, the fact that you have Mars and McKeesport in the Section 2 and that is a really big story. Now, but what other teams are going to emerge? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, how in the 4A classification that, there's just these teams that are so consistently excellent. And it's just been very difficult for other teams to break through. Now, Mars is kind of, breaking into that group, the elite group.
That's say that. That's like Montour. They've broke into that elite group, in my opinion, over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
They have.
So all right, guys. I'm going to put you on the spot. Ian, you first. Who you think wins section 1, 2, and 3?
I'll go Aliquippa, McKeesport, and Bell Vernon. But for who else could break through, don't sleep on West Mifflin. They've got a sophomore running back who's outstanding.
Yeah, Monda. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah.
All right, John.
Trinity's quarterback's really good too.
So first off, I want to start. I was just out Aliquippa. They lost a lot, but my goodness, they gained a lot. I mean, let's start with they're going to have Marcus Council, MJ Council coming in at quarterback. I was out there a lot last year. He was a guy. He had Quentin Good in front of him. He was a guy that was ready to start last year. If we're going to be honest, that happened to a few guys, but he already has a Division I offer before even playing. Playing a varsity snap. Then you got Larry Moon that came in from Central Catholic. Same thing with Senior. They transferred back to Aliquippa. Larry Moon's on his way to be a 5-star, a 5-star recruit. I can't even keep up with the offers. I think he's got 40. Senior Brooks is a guy that's going to take some weight off of Tyke Hayes the way that John Tracy was able to do the last few years. So Senior Brooks, I think he's going to be a guy that really, really breaks out this year. He has a great build, great agility, great feet, and he's a really hard worker. Erison Walker, I think we saw what he can do in the state championship game. He had 8 interceptions last year. That's a lot of interceptions in high school football. We could talk all day about Aliquippa, but I got them winning. McKeesport, they got a good young back in Keemon Jones or Keemon Spell and Anthony Boyd. It's a really good punch there too. So it's going to be interesting. I got McKeesport, and then I would say Thomas Jefferson. Luke Kosker come in at quarterback. He looked really good this summer. Shep Turk up front going to Pitt. Just a heck of he's really good. He was my number 1 offensive lineman in the 2025 class. And what coach does out there, they're always good. They're always disciplined. They're always big. They're always just tough. TJ. So those are my 3.
Well, it's hard to I don't never pick against Aliquippa. It's
Bruce,
hard
you've
to
learned
pick
something
against...
from me in 5 years.
I know. I was gonna say something, but I'm glad you kind of piped up. Literally, I almost fell out of my chair when you didn't say that they were gonna win section 1, but that's okay. Remember, this is preseason, and a lot of things are gonna happen. McKeesport and Bell Vernon. I know they lost, a lot, but my oh my. I think that that's just a program that has so much forward momentum. With they're winning over the last couple years. My gosh.
And Anthony Cruz out there, he played absolute great ball in that state championship game.
Yeah, he did.
He's gonna make a big impact in his senior season. They have Alonzo Wade too.
Yeah, who's a team that could be the surprise, John?
Oh, I got
just
2.
one.
One. You're killing me, Bruce.
It's just one.
I don't want to say Mars because they're like we talked about. They're in that tier now. I want to give them like West Allegheny. I think West Allegheny is going to surprise some people. They got Brock Cornell committed to Bucknell, and then his little brother Brody. They got Tyler Hatton, got a Division I offer. Roman Police. They got some really good pieces out there, and they seem to always be disciplined. They control the line of scrimmage, and their run game's always solid. I think West Allegheny is going to make some noise.
How about you, Ian? Who's going to be the surprise team in 4A?
Now
that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to win the championship. Maybe somebody who makes the playoffs who wouldn't necessarily you think might.
I actually think Mars with the quarterback wide receiver tandem and Coach Casper could actually be the surprise team to make the championship game. Like
Okay.
if they get on the other side of the bracket from Aliquippa, I could see them beating a Bell Vernon or a TJ in the playoffs. But I feel like sort of flying under the radar, West Mifflin and Trinity are the two that, and I agree with John on West Allegheny. Because I think John's right. Montour's in that elite class now. Bell Vernon's the two-time defending state champs in 3A, moving up to 4A. Interesting little switch that happened too, right? Like Central Valley won 2 state championships in 3A, got bumped up to 4A, and Bell Vernon moves down to 3A for 2 years, wins 2 state titles. Bell Vernon moves back up, Central Valley moves back down.
Yeah, but they butted heads with a state champion too in Aliquippa. So it's not like it was chopped liver or anything.
Well, and speaking of butting, yeah, go ahead, John. I got one final thought, but I'll let John take it too.
No, I was just agreeing with Bruce. Like, it wasn't chopped liver. I mean, Central Valley could go up, and I mean, that's tough.
That's tough.
Yeah, but
that really is tough. I mean,
what do you?
Yeah, and the schools are like 6 miles apart. So
yeah, right. All right.
So my final thought on 4A is circle your calendar for August 30th, because the Wpial, in their infinite wisdom, gave us a Aliquippa Bell Vernon week 1 matchup. So we get 2 defending state champs squaring off week 1. So circle your calendar, because that's going to be awesome.
All right.
Section matchups that are pretty good this year. Like Bishop Canterbury versus Seton LaSalle, that's a matchup I really want to see. I think that's week 1. Week 1, I believe.
Okay, well, let's go for 3A.
All right. On to 3A here, where Bell Vernon, the 2-time defending state champs, moves up to 4A, but Central Valley comes back in. We had a lot of movement too. This is where you start to see that when the state changed their formula this year for how enrollment counted for public schools, with how they counted kids who attended charter schools and home schools and all that. And you saw a lot of public schools moving up statewide and a lot of private schools move down statewide. So I think in the Wpial, the only private schools that actually moved up in classifications were ones that chose to play up, like Imani Christian. I think Olsh decided to play up as well. But North Catholic moving down from 4A to 3A, Imani Christian, whose coach we interviewed at the beginning of the show, playing up in 3A. And I think really Elizabeth Forward, now that Bell Vernon is out of the interstate conferences, it's their conference to lose down there. But honestly, when I look at this, I think the 3 best 3A teams in the state might all be in the Western Hills Conference, between Central Valley, Beaver, and Avonworth, in any order.
100%.
Really? Okay. All right. That's a very bold statement, but
I mean, pretty. I mean, that section now with Central Valley, that is going to be tough. And then North Catholic, they shouldn't be slept on at all. They played a tough 4A schedule last year. They got a quarterback in Joey Felitsky, who's had a big summer. I've seen him. He looks really good. They have Brady O'Hara, who we know about, headed to Penn State. Joseph Farr at tight end. Then they have a kid named Riker Kennedy at receiver, who's just dynamic as heck. North Catholic, I think, is a scary team to see in the playoffs just because of everything. And then they brought in ex-NFL quarterback Mike McMahon to run the offense. He's an offensive coordinator. So I think that's a scary team to see in the playoffs in 3A.
well, I think
that's my alma mater, so I can't talk too much good stuff about him, or people would think I'm biased. So I'll let you do it.
I think that what's happened since Central Valley has moved out and now is back in, I think that the overall depth of the 3A classification that Wpial has across the board has come up since the last time that Central Valley was in there. Obviously, with the addition of Imani, but Avonworth has played some good football and across the board. So it isn't going to be maybe the cakewalk that people might have thought. And, there could be a lot of, tough in-season battles for, all these teams like Imani and Central Valley and whatnot. So I like the fact, I think that the talent level has been raised. I think that it's going to be much more competitive maybe in 3A. Yeah, but it's tough to argue with Central Valley, Imani, and um, I think it's a toss up in Section 3. What do you think, guys?
I think it's
Sec-
Elizabeth Forward and a runaway.
Really?
Elizabeth. Yeah, I think Southmoreland might give them a little bit of a game, but I think Elizabeth Forward has too much experience. Ryan Messina, big, big quarterback, big tall quarterback, big arm. Chris Climbs, just a monster on both sides of the ball up front.
Well, I'm writing that down. I'm writing that down that I said it was going to be a toss up in Section 3 here, and you guys saying that it's forward and a runaway. So that'll be one of the things that we'll keep an eye on,
We will.
moving forward.
And to go back to Avonworth, this is how I was thinking about it the other day. Without Bell Vernon, Quentin Martin, Braden Locks, all those guys, they're two-time WPIL champions.
Mm-hmm.
So they might. I mean, that path is pretty clear. So we'll see.
Yeah, right. And that's going to be a tough, obviously Central Valley, the clear favorite there, but that's going to be a tough road to hoe there in Section 1.
And
I
don't
stopped
sleep
out.
on Beaver.
They have some of the best wide receivers in the entire Wpial. They have a kid named Amari Jackson that was flying all over camps this summer. Beaver, I mean, it's tough, and that's the same thing. Their coach was saying this section it's going to make you for the playoffs, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think
3A is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, just a couple other teams too. Highlands moving down from 4A to 3A gets to play against some of their traditional rivals, across the river with Valley and Burrell. Freeport's right next to them geographically. So, I think Highlands has some talent coming back, but just, playing in a section now where you get to play some of your traditional rivals just adds a little more to those games. Southmoreland too. They've never won a playoff game in their school history, but had a 40-year playoff drought that they broke a couple years ago, and now have made the playoffs in 4 out of 5 years. So, winning a playoff game is the next step there for them. But the other one, I'd say don't sleep on Greensburg-Salem for making the playoffs. I would not. They've got some talent coming back. I wouldn't be surprised if they snuck their way into, one of the last couple playoff spots either. But I think at the top, it's, I would not be surprised if 3 out of the 4 semifinalists in 3A all come from that Western Hills Conference, just because, Central Valley, Beaver, and Avonworth are so good. Imani Christian probably has the most D1 talent of any team in 3A, but my concern with them is their depth, just because they're so small that if they have 1 or 2 injuries, they're going to be kind of strapped for players. But they took on the challenge, credit to them, of playing up in 3A. I think they're the best team in that conference by far. But just once you get into the playoffs and the gauntlet of potentially having to go through, 2 or 3 of these other teams, even Elizabeth Forward, Central Valley, Beaver, Avonworth, North Catholic, it's going to be a tough playoffs.
Yep. Physicality there. All right, cool.
John, any final
John,
thoughts before we go
any
to
dark
2A?
horse team that you think is going to maybe exceed expectations in 3A this year?
I honestly, to me, Imani's a dark horse team because I don't think anyone's taking them serious. It seems like you guys are, but they're coming from 2A. But to your point, and they have probably the best athletes in all of 3A. What it's going to come down to is, like you said, with depth. By the time we get to November, are we going to have guys that we can run in and out? And also the line of scrimmage. Because we all know when you bump up from 2A to 3A, playing Central Valley linemen, Beaver linemen, Avenor, it's a different ball game.
All I can say is I saw that team last year. I thought I was looking at a 5A team. I mean, in their ability to compete and physicality, and that's the thing that amazed me. Now they lost their opening game to Steel High, but these guys, and you've touched on this, a little bit, John, on body type and whatever like that. These guys are, they're moving up to 3A for a reason. I think physically, I think that they're going to match up well with these guys. I don't think it was too much of a jump for them, and I think that's the slot that I think will work well for them.
And to touch on the body type, what I want to explain that a little bit more is it's almost like when I say, these guys are, they're big, they got some muscle. It's like if you don't, you're not going to last till November playing Western Pennsylvania football. It's just not. It doesn't work. The guys that are, in the weight room in the off season, putting that muscle on, they're the guys that can take 30 carries a game if you need them.
They're the ones that are imposing their will on their opponent, and that's really
yep.
what has to happen.
Yep, that's a perfect way to put it.
All right, on to 2A, where Beaver Falls is the defending champions, which was kind of a surprise last year. Beaver Falls finished third in the conference and then made that incredible run through the playoffs where they won, I think, three games in a row by a 2-point conversion, more or less. And I think Italian Buford, their running back, scored all three of them, which was kind of incredible. But fourth quarter comebacks for Beaver Falls. Beaver Falls lost a lot to graduation, but they're one of those teams that's just like a program and just keep coming back with guys year after year. And, you should never sleep on them. They've made the Wpial championship game all 4 years that they've been in 2A since moving down from 3A. So, definitely don't sleep on them. Steel Valley lost in the championship game. They've played Beaver Falls in the playoffs, I think, in 3 or 4 straight years now. And the winner of that game's gone on to win the Wpial title each time. So, Steel Valley loaded with talent. Donald Barksdale's incredible. Actually, the Barksdale brothers are incredible. South Park moving down, I think, is a very strong team. Yeah. And Western Beaver with Javen Peel, who set the Wpial freshman passing record last year. There's a lot of good teams, and John, you mentioned
eligible today, by the way.
Yeah. You mentioned seeing Seton LaSalle, and Washington, is always strong too. So a lot of good quality teams here in 2A. Should make for a good season. Elwood City was one of our favorite stories last year after they broke their long playoff drought. They've got some talent coming back, so should be a fun year. I think this classification had the most movement of anyone with Seton LaSalle, Shadyside Academy, South Allegheny, South Park moving down, Carlinton, Olsh, Union moving up, and then the other teams moved up and down. So this kind of has had the biggest change. But I think at the end of the day, it's still Steel Valley as the team to beat on top.
Yeah. I think it's a little bit more complex than that now. I really do. You got Seton LaSalle who beat Steel Valley last year.
That's a good point.
And I'm telling you right now, they are going to be dangerous. Khalil Taylor is the best athlete in the Wpial. I'm just going to say.
What about Washington this year?
They have a really good quarterback in Tristan Reed, and I think they're going to be there. They're always there. They're tough. They're fast, athletic. They're going to be there.
All right. Well,
and
let's
Western Beaver with Javen Peel. I mean, I think Western Beaver is the team to beat in that conference. But
really,
I think so with the quarterback that they have. But Beaver Falls, Elwood City's got a lot coming back. Mohawk, yeah.
Probably, and then a running back one of the best running backs in the Wpial that no one knows about is Elijah Palmer McCain. Since his sophomore year, he has been putting up numbers. Go look at the stats. You can probably go to the Post Gazette, whatever you want to do if you're watching this. The kid has put up numbers. He's not a real flashy kid on social media. You don't see him much. So you probably haven't heard of him, but he could flat out play football. Dan Bradley over there. Dan Bradley's a proven winner. You know what I mean? He's come in, and since he's come in, what was it, 2 years ago? The program has been on an incline. They finally broke through, made the playoffs. I think they're dangerous. Union, did they voluntarily go up?
I think they did, which I thought was kind of surprising.
Well, I think it was an enrollment thing. I think it was an enrollment thing.
There's no way. They graduate 45 kids. So I
can't believe that they would that a public school like that would voluntarily move up.
They probably don't want to play all the privates in 1A. You're avoiding the private schools in 1A. I mean, we have to have that conversation at some point.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good time too that we talked about the private schools moving down, because you've got Seton LaSalle, Shadyside Academy both moving down. Olsh is only up here because they voluntarily played up. This is where you really start to see those private schools coming down because of how the state changed the enrollment count.
Yeah, for our Union fans out there, let us know. I mean, if this was an enrollment thing or they opted to play up. It's been a long time since.
I'll find out. Yeah,
I mean, when was the last time a public school in the Wpial decided to play up?
Aliquippa.
No. They didn't decide.
No, they did.
Well,
they
they
did.
did decide. Yeah, I
the-
take that back.
The
But
first,
all right, beyond Aliquippa, who? I mean, I'm trying to remember somebody in the state.
Apollo
who-
Ridge.
a public school.
Apollo Ridge, the first
Really?
year of the sixth classification era, decided to play up because if they played up in 3A, I think they had 5 opponents within a 20-mile radius. But if they stayed down in 2A, their closest opponent was 25 miles away. So
Okay,
Apollo Ridge did it for geographic reasons.
All right. So
Yeah.
but it wasn't correct. So there wasn't a public school, and maybe some fans can come in the chat here at PA football history or whatever like that. Let us know if there's any public school in the state who voluntarily, besides Aliquippa, played up in the last 5 years, because I can't remember one.
No, I
Yeah,
don't need.
And Aliquippa's wasn't in the last 5 years. Aliquippa was also, they were a 1A size school, and at the beginning of the sixth classification era, they decided to play up in 3A. And then when the state put the success formula in, that was when the state forced them from 3A up to 4A, and so on and so forth. But they're, yeah, we've told that story before. But
I heard
think,
that story.
Yeah, if you want a sleeper team here, I think South Park has a lot of talent there. And moving down, they were a team that almost made the semifinals in 3A last year, just narrowly lost their quarterfinal to East Allegheny. So I think South Park's a really good squad that could make some noise here too.
I'm going to go as far as to say South Park's one of the favorites. People don't realize they got Eric DeRue at running back. That kid, he's dynamic. The Cunningham brothers blocking for him up front. I mean, I don't know how much better it can get in 2A than having those two big boys. They can move, get after it. I mean, South Park's going to be dangerous. And then to touch on Seton LaSalle, I'm headed there Wednesday. I just think that moving after that team was young last year. I want to put it like that. They played a lot of tough teams. They played the Beavers. They played all the tough 3A teams. I'm sorry.
Ahead.
No, go ahead.
Would you consider Elwood City to be a sleeper or a team on, I mean, they've obviously started to change the culture there. Mm-hmm. And, do they have the talent to keep it rolling?
I still think they're a sleeper. I still see them as a 500 or maybe a game above 500 football team, to be honest with you.
Okay.
There's just so much talent in AA now, and especially that conference. That conference is tough. You got Western Union. I mean, who else is in there? I can't even think off the top of my head.
Beaver Falls.
Beaver Falls. Mohawk. Mohawk won't be as good as last year, but they're going to be around. Mohawk's big. They're always big. They always got big boys. They always control the line of scrimmage. So hey, Elwood does have an opening there. I didn't realize that. I think they could come in third in that section. Is that what you're thinking for them? I think I see a third place finish in that section. Looking.
I think I had them fourth, but really, I think Western Beaver's the best. And then between Mohawk's got 3 wide receivers coming back for that team. And they're pretty good.
That is quarterback.
Oh, is he moving to quarterback? Okay.
The other day, he's moving over to quarterback.
Okay. So but still, so Mohawk's got some talent coming back. I think Beaver Falls is always strong, and then Elwood City. So I think, between the 3 of those, I think they're 2, 3, and 4. I'm just not sure what order. I think a couple other teams just to throw out there. Waynesburg had kind of a breakthrough year last season where they made the playoffs. I don't think they're good enough to challenge Washington or Seton LaSalle for the top spot, but I think they're good enough to potentially make the playoffs again, maybe come in third in that conference. And the other team I've got my eye on is potentially one of I'll say a good story team. I'm not sure if they're good enough to make the playoffs, but South Allegheny moving down from 3A to 2A. They've used 2 different quarterbacks last year. Both of them come back. Their leading rusher, Cameron Epps, ran for almost 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns last year. He comes back for his senior season. So I think the move down in classification should help South Allegheny a little bit. I I could see them competing for third place in that conference behind South Park and Steel Valley. They may wind up finishing like fifth, but South A went. Here's the thing, though, right? South A went 1-9 the last 2 years. So if you win 4 games, that's a dramatic improvement from 1-9.
We'll take it.
Yeah. All right.
One last thing. I watch Union play a lot. I watch Western play. I think that's going to be a matchup. I think Union matches up very good against Western Beaver because what do we always know about quarterbacks? You got to get pressure to them. And Union has a guy named Jamel Mitchell. I know it's 2 years ago, but if you look back to that run they went on in the Wpial game, he absolutely controlled that game from the get-go. He was all over the quarterback, and the quarterback couldn't get comfortable. I think the way you got to attack Western Beaver is you got to take some chances, and you got to make Wpial uncomfortable. Because if you let him sit in the pocket, he's going to sit there and pick you apart.
That's a
well
great
said.
point. And Western almost beat Steel Valley in the playoffs last year. I think that was a 3-point game. So, I think this is about as wide open. I think Steel Valley with the Barksdale brothers is probably the favorites in my mind. But, like we said, South Park, Western, Beaver Falls, Seton, Washington, they're all, semifinal capable. And then once you get to that point, it's just matchups and who you play.
Yeah, hey, listen, I just want to do a quick shout out to some guys on the chat that have put in some good words. Mason Marth, Dave Odom, and that giving the love to John.
Yeah, Dave says nice to see PA
today in the house. So anyway.
Yeah, John, did you have one final thought here on 2A?
With Steel Valley, I didn't really touch on them because I think they are presumptive favorite. Duran's not cleared yet for week 0 against Clareton. I'm hearing he's not going to be in there. But Donald, and then they got a guy named Razon Howell. It seems like every year Steel Valley has a big lineman that can move, and he just moves bodies. He's a guy that's going to be a big impact player. Donald's going to run behind him. But when Duran Barksdale comes back, look out.
Okay.
That's a great concluding thought for 2A. All right, on to 1A, where Fort Cherry won their first Wpial title last year, made it all the way to the state championship game. And, statewide, the story is Steelton Highspire moving up from 1A to 2A, which kind of clears the path potentially for a Wpial champion to make it there. Although also Westinghouse moving down from 2A to 1A, I think Westinghouse is kind of the statewide favorite, and we could potentially, because I looked at the brackets, the City League is on the other half of the bracket, so we could potentially wind up with a Wpial City League state championship game.
No, I didn't even look at that. That's crazy.
I looked at him this morning. Yeah. I'll pull it up here, but John, I'll let you talk about some of the teams you like, because I feel like I could talk about these 1A teams forever.
I'm most passionate about single A. I actually started this platform for the smaller schools. I just didn't feel like there was enough attention. So I was out in Neshannock today.
Oh man, they're good.
They've been in Double A since six class era has started, and they've been a team that they always have about 9 wins, 2 losses in that area. They're under new coach Mike Bonjavingo, as well as Fred Mazzocca moves over to Newcastle. But they've played big-time ball these last however many years. I think it was 2016. Is that when we moved over to classes? They've been in 2A. Now, back in the day, you guys been following football for a long time. Neshannock was originally in that conference with Union and Laurel and Shenango, all the Lawrence County schools. Neshannock's dropping down into single A. The linemen they have, I think that they're going to be it's going to be tough to beat them just simply off how they move the line of scrimmage. But Fort Cherry is going to be able to play with them because that's the one team up front that I thought in single A last year. I thought that's why. Matt Sieg was a big reason why. But Fort Cherry's line, those boys were making holes. They were downfield blocking. Those guys, they were mean and they were physical, big, they could move. Fort Cherry, they got to be the favorite. Bishop Canavan and Neshannock are my 2A, 2B. I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of people kind of wrote off Bishop Canavan, in my opinion, just because they thought they were going to run through the Wpial and they were just going to win it the last 2 years. But Union and Fort Cherry stepped in. But I think Rich Johnson has put together a good staff this year. They have Marcus on offense and then Chayton Pine. former Pitt player running the defense. Those two guys have brought a new energy in. And I was around the Bishop Canavan program out at Woodland Hills for the 7v7 this past summer. There's a new energy around the program. You could feel it. Kulishevsky is one of the best quarterbacks in the class of 2025. He led the Wpial in touchdowns last year. I mean, DeMar Olds, he's a freak athlete. He could do anything on the field, quarterback, receiver, DB. Henry Barbish, we know about, headed to Air Force. There's a lot to talk about in 1A. Sarah Catholic, how about them moving down?
Yeah, that was my thing there too, was Sarah Catholic. I mean, I think that mentally, we were talking about that obviously with Coach Prady, a little bit. It's, so much of it is obviously the physical aspect, but mentally, we're moving down and we're playing these teams that were, smaller than us, and I think that the mental aspect of moving down, it's easier for a team to move down than move up. And I just wanted to touch on one point here too, throughout this whole thing. And I think that we're seeing it here, more so in, the movement in 1A and 2A is that's a lot of the reason why the PIAA went to 6 classifications. If you think about all this movement that's been going on with teams and different matchups and everything else, it's because of the 6 classifications. If we remained at 4, you wouldn't see nearly this kind of turnover. You'd have the usual suspects. We wouldn't be talking about as many sleeper teams or as many teams that would be having opportunities for Wpial and or, deep runs in the state. So I think that, like I said, the 6 classifications has been great for getting away from not the usual suspects in football.
And to your point, Bruce, that you made earlier, I think when these teams are moving down, moving up, you said mental. I think some of it also is a lot of these teams have been in these same classifications, same sections for so long. They're so used to seeing the same coaching staff, the same formations, the same. When these guys move up, move down, I think that's when a team can make a run like that because there's something that these teams have never seen. New formations, new coaching styles. Because you do get used to, like I even remember in high school, you get used to playing the same teams. Right. You kind of expect, even if you don't know year in, year out if they're going to be good, under that coach they're going to be tough. Ball players, good coaches. You see, they don't always need top tier athletes, top tier players to have good teams. There's a lot of good teams out there that have no Division I recruits. They're just disciplined, well coached, and they're good enough athletes to do the job.
I'll just give an example.
Been running the same offense for 100 years.
Oh, Coach Matsu, you can't count him out, man.
No,
you can't. I went to an Ulsh game last year versus Ulsh versus Rochester. They thought Ulsh was gonna, give it to them. Rochester, they're another team. They'll pound the ball down your throat if you don't stop it.
And they had a couple injuries last year too, I think, that kind of set them back. So I mean, and even that conference, like Neshannock, I think is the clear favorite, but Southside's got some talent coming back. Rochester's always strong. Shenango's got some talent. Laurel, snuck into the playoffs last year. That's a good league there.
Southside will lose their quarterback and their running back, but they're gonna return AC Corfield. He's a 2026 guy. I mean, he's a solid player, man. He's shown in the Wpial game. He can compete with the best of them. And they got a guy named Slayton Williams over there that's, he's a good player. So Southside's always going to be there. They're a team that will line up and they'll run it down your throat too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and they run that triple option that's tough to stop.
Yeah, it definitely. So obviously you guys have been talking about, the elite teams here in 1A. Who are some of the teams that you see, Ian and John, that are gonna maybe, that are gonna move up into that elite classification this season?
Well, I would say the one we're not talking about is Clairton, and Clairton brings back so much talent that, I mean, I think Clairton's a team that could line up with Fort Cherry and play with them. If they can match up in the trenches, Clairton has the talent on the outside to absolutely compete this year.
Oh, they got athletes everywhere. My goodness. They're literally everywhere. They have a kid that hasn't even touched the field yet with a Division I offer. 2028 kid. So it's like, I mean, Jeff Thompson, a quarterback, he's coming into his own. I think he's going to be a solid leader for them at the quarterback position. Zamir Correll, I think he's probably the best jump ball receiver in the entire Wpial. You throw a ball up to that kid, he's going to grab it.
He's
I
like
mean,
6'5", isn't he? He's crazy tall.
They call him 6'6", yeah. He's
So who do
6'6".
you like, John, in section 1, 2, 3, and 4?
So in section 1, I got Clairton. Section 2, oh my gosh.
That's why I wanted to go last, because of section 2.
The Tri-County South is so much fun. California is always the team to beat there. Lee Kwalk comes back at running, but I just wrote my TCS preview today, so
I saw it because a couple years ago, Mapletown went, I think, 10-0.
Yeah.
And South had 2 or 3 losses, and they played Southside in the quarterfinals, and Southside beat them like 52-0. And I'm just like, what the heck? So I hope to see some teams come out of there and compete a little bit more. But just looking at it off the rip, I guess, California. Now, Bishop Canevin and Fort Cherry, I'm going to throw a coin up because I think those teams played 10 times. I think it might be 5-5, even though they played twice last year. I think it's going to be a different type of game this year. I think Bishop Canevin is going to learn a lot from their mistakes last year. I do feel that. And they're going to have to beat, they're going to have to beat, if they want a Wpial title, I think it's pretty clear. They're going to have to beat them maybe in the regular season and then in the playoffs again. I mean, that's what happened last year, and that's tough to see Fort Cherry twice in the same year. Because we know how hard it is to beat a team twice in the same year. I never like doing that. So I'm going to say Fort Cherry just because Matt Sieg is the best player on the field every time he touches it in single A. And I really, truly feel that. And then the last, I think it's Neshannock. Yeah. Neshannock, they're too much up front. Gino Mazzocco at quarterback. Anthony Eakin, he's running a 4-4 running back. He's got incredible speed. Tony Parada up front, another big lineman. Every year they just pump out big linemen over there. And then head coach Mike Bonjavingo. I was just up there before I logged in with you guys. I talked with him tonight. He's a young guy. He's only about 3-4 years older than me. He's from Newcastle. He's from that area. I mean, the energy he brings, the kids relate well with it because he's a younger guy and he has tons of energy, and the kids love him. So I think he's going to fit in great replacing Fred Mazzocco.
It's my turn now, I guess.
Yeah, your turn.
So I think Clairton's the team to beat in the Eastern Conference. But I think second place there is really interesting. Greensburg Central Catholic brings back their all-around stud and Samir Crosby, but Leechburg has a ton of talent returning too. Leechburg was one of those teams that broke a long playoff drought a few years ago, and Jaden Floyd, their quarterback, was a member of the 1,000 club last year. Bring back a couple of receivers. So, I think Leechburg's a talented team. I don't think they're good enough to challenge Clairton, but I think they're good enough to make the playoffs. The Tri-County South, I think it's California's to lose, but Jefferson Morgan, who made the playoffs for the first time in I think 12 or 13 years last year, gets their dual threat quarterback and then I think 3 junior running backs back as well.
Wow.
So they, for like the Tri-County South, John, you hit it on the head. You can have a Mapletown team that went 10-0 and won the conference title, and then last year finished in last place because all those guys graduated. That I think Jefferson Morgan's a team on the rise, that they've got these kids that played last year as sophomores and juniors and are now going to be juniors and seniors. I don't know if they're good enough to win a playoff game, but after you miss the playoffs for 13 straight years, just making the playoffs 2 years in a row is a big thing. Yeah. The other thing I think interesting in the Tri-County South and kind of 1A as a whole, we talked at the outset of the show about the Wpial selecting wild card teams. Only the top 3 are guaranteed playoff spots in each conference, and the Wpial is going to pick 4 wild cards. So you could very easily have a 4th place team in the Tri-County South that doesn't make the playoffs, and then a 5th place team in another conference that makes it. So I think that's just a storyline to watch as we go.
Ian, I have a question for you. You'll probably know this.
Yeah.
So those 4 wild cards, I've looked into it, but I've had this question. Those 4 wild cards can come from any sections, right?
Correct.
So what if you got a section that's got teams that beat each other up and they're all, you got 2 of the top teams, but everyone else is 5-5, 4-5, but they're good football teams. How does that work? Is there a section that could get 2 or 3 wild card bids? Because that can 5A easily.
Sure,
I know
sure.
1A. Oh, wow.
Absolutely, the human element this year, right, Ian?
Yep. Yeah. The way I read the way I read it in the Wpial cover page on their website was the Wpial committee will select the 2 or 3 or 4 wild cards, however many they are, from the teams that don't automatically qualify as top finishers. So yeah, they could pick all 4 wild cards from the same conference if they wanted to.
They won't. I don't think they will, but you know what I mean, because there's usually one team in every. Now I'm looking at it, there's usually one team that's. I don't know, that Bishop Canavan section is going to be a little bit better this year.
I'll tell you what, that Black Hills Conference. I mean, you're absolutely right about Fort Cherry and Bishop Canavan, but Sarah Catholic brings back their quarterback, their leading receiver, and their leading rusher, and moving down in classification, they're going to be really good. Cornell's always tough. Monessen got some young kids who are undersized but can absolutely fly. Like that Kershaw kid, I saw him play when he was a freshman. I was like, this kid is like the ground's on fire when he runs. It's crazy.
Brothers, too, they both can move.
Yeah. And then the Big Seven, Neshannock's the favorite, but Rochester Southside, they're both solid teams. So there's a lot of really good teams in 1A this year. And geographically, I don't know how Sarah Catholic, over in the Mon Valley by McKeesport winds up with like Bishop Canavan over past Green Tree, but I guess okay.
Arnold,
yeah,
that's a hike.
It is. That's a long way. Although, the Wpial did put Burgettstown and Derry in a conference together one time, so I guess I shouldn't be too surprised.
Yeah, no, it's going to be. I think 1A is going to be, could be some of the wildest action that we're going to see this year by far.
I think that was 2014 that they had Burgettstown and Derry together, and that was nuts. But yeah, so that's pretty much all we got. I did find real quick here the where did I find it? Hold on, sorry. Is it this one? Wait. Oops. Wait. I have too many windows open on my computer. I'm sorry. I'm sure that never happens to anyone else. But okay, here we go. So I did find the statewide brackets in 1A, and you may have to squint to kind of see it. But the Wpial champ in 1A does enter at the semifinals and then plays the winner of the District 9, District 10 champions in the semis. So that means Westinghouse is on the other half of the bracket. So we could have a Westinghouse versus Wpial champion state championship game in 1A.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it is a little crazy, but look, I mean, if you look at, even college sports or whatever like that, you see conference champions sometimes playing one another for, NCAA championships. So there's no reason why that can't happen in a high school level.
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb. To me, for entertainment purposes, I wish the City League and Farrell were in the Wpial.
I agree with you.
You wish.
Yeah.
But I know it's probably popular, so
yeah. Actually, we had Farrell's head coach on a few years ago when they were playing. Was it Sarah Catholic in the state semis? And we had both coaches on, and we asked Farrell's coach about playing in the Wpial, and he said, it's always something we take a look at. And actually, I think they petitioned to join the Wpial and got turned down this year.
I just talked summer. I know him pretty well just from being on the circuit at this point, and yeah, they did get turned down. I'll tell you privately why. I don't want to put it out there. There's always a reason. But yeah, they did want to get back in the Wpial and they got turned down. And I'll just put it like this. It was because not everyone wanted to drive all the way to Farrell. It is a further drive for some of those Pittsburgh schools. I mean, so that was the thing. And I mean, hey, maybe one day. I know they were my grandpa talks about it all the time. They were in the Wpial for a lot of years.
Yeah, it does mean a lot. I mean, I know that there were a lot of changes, now for, Berks League teams and how they have to drive, but nobody drives as far as teams in the Mid-Penn conference. So, I mean, when you're going from State College all the way to Chambersburg, I mean, like, and that's for all sports, like on a school night. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's crazy stuff. Right?
Yeah.
They do it.
Yeah.
Well, John, thanks so much for taking the time to join us tonight, sharing all your expertise with us. So I know you've been posting on Twitter your, top players in each class, along with all the interviews and stuff you do. So you want to give a shout out to where people can find you online and find your content and how to, hook up with you?
We're on every platform. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. There's probably more, but those are the main ones. All you gotta do is type in PA Today. It'll pop right up. If you can't find it, just go on Google PA Today. It'll all pop right up. So go give us a follow. The 2026 rankings are coming out this week, and then we're gonna do team rankings after the scrimmages. I want to get a feel. I want to see some film, and then I'll put out some rankings. So thank you.
Great. Listen. All right, my man, John, thanks a lot, man. All right, we'll see you on the flip side, buddy.
John,
Yes,
we
sir.
appreciate your time. Thanks so much for everything.
Alrighty.
See ya. So the one thing that I want to say right here is we've had really a lot of great interaction tonight on the chat, all the kind words from the fans and what have you. And, we really appreciate that. I mean, it means a lot to us that, what we do. And, you and I just got together and started doing this. Somebody who wanted to learn more about the Wpial and a man who knows everything about the Wpial, and put our heads together in a show that would bring about conversation, not just in District 7, but all across the state. And I think we're starting to do that, Ian.
We are. And actually, on that note, that's a good segue, because I did have one more thing to kind of run through here. Penn Live released their first preseason statewide rankings. So I put together, a couple slides here, and, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them because it's preseason rankings, all that. But I think, just some interesting notes here. So we'll start in 6A. St. Joe's Prep, obviously the presumed, top team in the state, no surprise there. But Imhotep Charter got forced up with the success formula from 5A to 6A. So potentially, you could have a Imhotep St. Joe's Prep game to decide the District 12 champions. I think Imhotep gets to play in the public league, and St. Joe's Prep's in the Catholic league. So, those two facing off in what's essentially the first round of the state playoffs is going to knock one of those two out very early. So I think statewide, that's definitely something to keep an eye on in 6A.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that some of the teams, especially down in the Philadelphia area, they just move up to 6A, and then they can have as many transfers and as many wins as they need to, knowing that it is what it is. So now nobody can really argue with everything that's going on in District 12, because everybody, with the exception of maybe Roman Catholic, is playing at the 6A level. So,
and that's a good segue to the 5A rankings, where Roman Catholic is actually Penn Live's top ranked team in 5A. A team that hasn't been heard much from on the state level, because Imhotep's kind of been the force in District 12, but also you've got Bishop McDevitt moving up in District 3, and that potentially sets up, with the way the statewide brackets are, that the Wpial champion in 5A plays the District 3 champion in the state semis. So you could potentially have the Wpial champion having to face Bishop McDevitt just to get to the state championship game. Whereas, when McDevitt was in 4A, they were on the other half of the bracket, so they didn't play Aliquippa or whoever until the state finals. But now they're on our side of the bracket. So I think that's something to watch as the season rolls along in 5A.
And don't sleep on, I guess the bad thing, I don't want to say bad thing, but I mean, both Manheim Central and Bishop McDevitt played for the District 3 4A championship the last 3 years in a row, and they both got moved up. So actually, Bishop McDevitt chose to move up. And a lot of that is the fact of they're actually playing in the Commonwealth Conference now, in the Mid-Penn Conference. So Bishop McDevitt, now they're playing the likes of Central Dauphin, Cumberland Valley, State College, Chambersburg. I mean, they've really moved up in the level of teams that they're playing. And I got the chance to talk to Stone Saunders, of quarterback there for Bishop McDevitt, record holder, whatever like that. They relished that. In fact, maybe sometime here I'll try and get that out on my YouTube channel and send everybody the link and listen to what this guy said about the move up there, taking it as a challenge, and the whole school and the whole coaching staff and the entire team of, elevating themselves, challenging themselves, kind of like what Imani did as well. So I'll try and do that, and then we'll get a link out there and people can listen to what Stone had to say, and I think you'll be impressed.
Yeah, that would be cool. You mentioned those teams moving up out of 4A. So the 4A statewide rankings, Aliquippa number 1, McKeesport number 3, Bell Vernon number 7. Having moved up from the 3A to 4A. But I think the interesting thing here, Wyomissing in District 3, had been, in the state semis, state championship game for a while. They're now moving up. I think that was a force up, right? They had enough success points. They had to get moved up.
Transfers. They had a lot of transfers as well.
Yeah. So, I think the interesting thing to me on a statewide level, I know who the favorites are in the Wpial, but who comes out of the other half of that bracket to challenge for the state title, because there's a lot of, I'll say, not the usual suspects here. Wyomissing was in 3A for a while. Jersey Shore made that one run to the championship game a few years ago. But a lot of the heavy hitters aren't here. The Bishop McDevitts of the world, and Allentown Central Catholics made some noise in the past, but potential for some different teams to kind of work their way in on a statewide level.
Twin Valley and Wyomissing are in the same section in the Lancaster Lebanon League. I mean, Twin Valley, for people that don't know who they are, they're in Berks County here in Pennsylvania. Brett Myers is the coach there. You probably know him from Middletown, where he took Middletown to 3 consecutive 3A championships. He's the coach at Twin Valley, so quite a pedigree there. His son is the quarterback. But Wyomissing, everything is new to them. They stayed in the same section, but all of the teams changed in the section, and their classification changed. They're playing even teams, non-PIAA teams, in the Interact down in Philadelphia this year. So a lot of changes there. Really interested to see how that works out. And opening weekend, oh, by the way, Wyomissing's playing Southern Columbia.
Wyo was the ones who ended Southern Columbia's big winning streak a few years ago, if I recall correctly.
Did. Yep. Yeah. They beat them at Southern Columbia. So now they're doing a home and home, and this year they will play opening week at Wyomissing.
And Southern Columbia somehow skirted the state again to not have to move up, but we'll just ignore that man behind the curtain. In 3A, we have Central Valley as the top ranked team after they moved down from 4A. With Wyo moving out too, there's a lot of other potential here for some other teams. Newman Goretti and Northwestern Lehigh both made state championship games the last 2 years, and they were the teams that lost to Bell Vernon. But Notre Dame, Green Pond, Mount Carmel, that's a move up, right? Because they were in 2A previously, I believe. Yeah. But I think personally, I think Central Valley, Avonworth, and Beaver are 3 of the best teams in the state here in 3A. I do think it's interesting, that Central Valley can move down and automatically be the number 1 ranked team. But to the Wpial's credit, in the 8 years of the 6 classification era, the Wpial has won 7 of the 8 3A state titles. Yeah. So I think the strength of 3A has always been in the Wpial. So I'm not surprised to see the top Wpial team on top of the rankings.
I'm not either. I mean, Coach Lyons there. I mean, at Central Valley, I'll tell you what. I mean, they're clearly the favorite, but our buddy Albie Crosby there with Newman Goretti, keep an eye out for them this year. I think that they've got I think that they're going to have some talent really rise to the top. So Keep an eye on Goretti this year.
Good to know. In 2A, we mentioned Southern Columbia, but with Westinghouse moving down to 1A, given their enrollment size, that potentially opens the door for the Wpial champion. Steel Valley is the only Wpial team ranked in the top 10, but there's a lot of very talented Wpial teams here, as John and I talked about. And Southern Columbia is just a juggernaut, but I think the other half of the bracket's pretty wide open for, who potentially challenges them. I like, the chances of a Wpial team to make it back to Cumberland Valley, but I think, just the behemoth that is Southern Columbia, having been able to win, 6 or 7 straight state titles and stay in 2A, skirting the success formula. It's just, it is what it is. I understand why they're the number 1 ranked team.
The only thing I could say is just keep your eye on, honorable mentions. Schuylkill Haven in 2A. That's a team with a lot coming back from an undefeated team last year. Surprised that they're not ranked a little bit higher. So that's maybe a dark horse team I'm keeping an eye out for.
I guess the other one we should mention here is Steelton High Spire. They got an honorable mention from the Penn Live folks, but Steel High, 2-time defending state champs in 1A, getting pushed up to 2A because of the success formula. How can they compete now? And especially that the Irby brothers have graduated. I mean, those guys were great players, don't get me wrong, but when you lose players of that caliber and that talent and have to move up in classification, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they compete.
I think that they're going to do just fine. Clearly they're not at the level that they were previously, but the cupboard is definitely not bare. They've got some good sized guys. The question is who is going to basically try and fill that huge chasm of, leadership role there. I think that that's the single biggest thing that, Coach Irby's got to, come up with is how does he mold a player or players to take the place of, his sons in a leadership role for that team. That's just monumental task, I think.
Yeah. And finally in 1A, no real surprises here. Westinghouse moving down, having made the last 2 state championship games in 2A, is the presumptive favorite in 1A out of the Pittsburgh City League. A lot of good Wpial teams, as we talked about: Fort Cherry, Clairton, Neshannock, Bishop Canavan, Southside. Don't sleep on Sarah Catholic either. So a lot of talent in the Wpial here. I think the other one to watch is Bishop Guilfoyle in District 6. They had won a couple state titles
They had an enormous win streak of
they got forced up to 2A because of the success formula for a little while, and have now moved back down to 1A where they won those state titles before. So they're a team to kind of keep an eye on as well as the season goes on. So that is pretty much all we got. Thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks to Greater Latrobe head coach Ron Prady, Imani Christian head coach Laroi Johnson, and John from PA Today Sports, for making our big giant season preview show. In the past, we did this, in 2 chunks. We did it all as one. We're not going to be here next week because I'm on vacation, which is why we did one big show to kick off the season.
I liked this. I really did. I think, this time of year at the 40,000 foot level, having John and the back and forth, what do you think? Because it is, I mean, it's, what do you think?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yep. Yeah, absolutely. It was John's great. And I highly recommend following him on Twitter or wherever else you can find him, PA Today Sports. He does a great job. And I remember last year when we had John on, and, I was stunned that all the content he was putting out was just one guy doing it. I was like, he has to have a team of people, but it's not. It's just him. He goes around to all these places, talks to these people. He does all the work himself, and it's incredible the amount of content he's able to put out. And he knows, he's talked to these players, these coaches. He's watched film. He put in so much work during the off season. It was just incredible. So John does an awesome job. Big fans of his. So give him a follow, shout him out. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us. And so we'll be back in 2 weeks on August 26th, which is a Monday. Then the following Monday is Labor Day, so we'll probably be on a different night that week. But we're gonna try and do Monday nights at 9:30 this year. I think that's good. I'll get my kids in bed, and we can have a good show.
Yeah, a few less interruptions. Not that there's anything wrong with that. We always like having the kids there, whatever like that. I'm gonna move into my man cave this year for the show. I guess I'm trying to come up with a backdrop or something. I went back and it was looking like our first year of shows, and I did. I was down here in the man cave and had a backdrop and everything like that. I think I'm going to do that this year, especially starting at 9:30. I mean, there's like a noise curfew in my borough at like 10 o'clock, so I certainly don't want to be hauled off to jail in the middle of a podcast.
I think the one year we did the state championship show, you were out in Hershey and got kicked out of the like media room or whatever and had to do it from outside. That was, we've adapted and made do. I did a season preview show once with a crying baby on my lap. It was, this is a family program. It is, we have lives outside the show, but it's great to be back for year 5. It's hard for me to believe this is the 5th year we're doing this, but I have so much fun doing this show. This is great.
Well, we didn't know how long we'd been doing it. Chris, our buddy, the one that said this is year 5. I couldn't even imagine that it's come to this, but we have so much fun, and I'm really appreciative of the fact that we have a lot of other fans who enjoy the content and the way that we approach it too. I think it's a perfect way. I'm not a Wpial guy, but I know enough to be dangerous and can bring perspective of other parts of the state, which I think is enormously important when you talk about football, is that you can't be too parochial. I have to try and focus on the big picture, which ultimately, we do as well. And I think that obviously the focus is the Wpial, but you can't lose sight of the big picture. And that is each one of these teams is trying to win a state championship. And that's part of the equation for us when we do this program.
Absolutely. And just the stories we've been able to tell over the years too, teams breaking long losing streaks or breaking playoff droughts and things like that, the history and the storytelling aspect. And, we'll get into that a little more as the season goes on. And all of our friends that have, out there supported the show, our PA football history segments that our friends at, PA football history put together for us, and our friends at KDKA Radio that do a great job broadcasting, radio broadcasts of all the games and really do a top notch. I mean, they basically put in the same level of broadcast for Wpial high school games as they do like the Pirates games, professional level. They do pit games too. They go all out, and it's great. So for other folks out there that might be watching, if you want us to, help share, help promote your stuff, we're happy to, I always take the perspective of the more information that's out there, the better for people. Mm-hmm. So I'm happy to, help cross promote people. If people have businesses and want to sponsor the show or segments of the show, we're happy to, have those conversations. So hit us up on Twitter. I'm Wpial_Blitz. Bruce is Badgley Bruce. So you can hit us up on Twitter, chat with us, let us know. But thanks everyone for your continued support. And I'm thrilled that we're doing this for our 5th year.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Thanks for tuning in. And next show is the 26th. So for Ian McMeans, I'm Bruce Badgley. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in a bit, gang.